I'll tell you somebody who has done a spectacular job for us here at JAKIB. And I'll tell you what, before I bring John McMullen in, I want to tell him how much I respect his work. John does a great job, man. I hear him asking, I tune on Twitter to the Eagles press conference and I listen to it and I hear John asking always the right questions, where we're going, what were you thinking, what's the direction that you're going in, do you have there's so many good things that he does. And plus on Birds 365 there with Jody, those guys do a fabulous show. I'm kind of early for me, but I watch it. And when I asked John goes, Sills, I could come up for air a little bit here now because we got a little bit of time. But as free agency starts, John will be back down in the bunker and he'll be back in the lab real soon. He joins us now here from Bird 360, John McMullen. So are you out of the bunker now, John?
Yeah, man. Your show, unfortunately, I'm always at the NovaCare complex during your show, Dan. So it's difficult. If it were radio, if it were old school day, you just pick up the phone and do it. But now everything's got to be on StreamYard. You got to be near the studio. So I'm never near the studio, basically.
Well, let's go. John, give me your overall synopsis so far from the final game against Tampa Bay to where we are today with the coordinators, and how do you feel about where the organization is right now?
Yeah, I think they're trying to thread a very small needle, very small head of the needle with what they're doing with the coaching staff. I've talked to Nick a lot over the years, and one thing he has consistently said, and he has verbalized it it doesn't matter if it's Shane Steichen, it doesn't matter if it's Brian Johnson, it doesn't matter if it's Howie Roseman, Dom DeSandro, Jeffrey Lurie, as long as I'm here, this is going to be my offense. And he's still here, and it's not his offense. So you can do the math of why that is. I think it's pretty obvious. And I think there's a lot of potential issues that could come up down the road if things don't go well. As you know, if you win, nothing matters, right? If you win, nobody's going to complain. But if you start struggling, then there's a lot of, and you saw it down the stretch last season. So from my standpoint, I said, Jeffrey Lurie can do what he wants. It's his team. But, if you don't have confidence in the guy, why are you keeping him around and ordering him to hire specific people? I never got that with Doug Peterson. I'm pretty consistent. I don't get it with Nick Sirianni. If you don't have confidence in him to hire his own people, why is he here?
John, do you think it was the right move to bring him back, or do you think they should have moved on?
No, I think they should have brought him back, but I think they should have brought him back and allowed him to move forward the way he wanted to move forward. I think he earned that right. And by no means am I trying to say last season ended well. It was as bad as can possibly be. Bottom line, though, is you can look around this league. There aren't too many guys who have a 667 winning percentage and 3 consecutive playoff bursts. So it's got to be the whole picture. And from that standpoint, he earned another season. And then if things go wrong next year, then you have some difficult conversations. But instead, you sort of straddle the fence. You keep the head coach with less power. From the outside looking in, it sort of looks like Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett, and that didn't work. We'll see if this works. I do think they have talented coordinators. I think Vic is very good. I think Kellen Moore is very good. And Nick Sirianni has no, let me make it clear. Nick Sirianni would have no issue with Vic Fangio. He wanted Vic Fangio last year. That part of it's not an issue, but obviously him not being involved with the offense could be a major issue.
John, do you have more concerns with the relationship with Kellen Moore, Jalen Hurts, or Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni? And what I mean by that is when you're putting a game plan together and all of a sudden you're in the fourth quarter and you decide to run a play, does Nick have overriding power not to run a play? How is that dynamic going to work when maybe, you're the head coach? I mean, he's got to have a job. There's got to be some autonomy somewhere, or is there not? Are you concerned about that relationship, especially if things kind of wobble out of the gate?
Yeah, I mean, this is supposed to be Kellen Moore's offense. So from that standpoint, he's going to be in charge of that type of situation. He's going to be in charge of the game plan. He's going to be in charge of the play calling. I imagine if they get off to a bad start, that could change. And, Nick Sirianni could talk it over with Jeffrey Lurie. And I'm not naming Howie Roseman for a reason, because those who blame Howie Roseman, that had nothing to do with Howie Roseman. That was a Jeffrey Lurie decision. So as far as scaling back Nick's power, and if they lose, everything's on the table. If they win, it's going to be Kellen Moore's offense. So I guess that part of it doesn't matter. If you're winning, it cures all ills. If you're losing, yeah, then a lot of things can be put on the table. And at some point, maybe Nick will be back in charge. But do you really want that? Obviously you want them to win. So the goal is to be successful with Kellen Moore running the offense.
John, I had Dave Wannstedt on, who does a lot of work up in Chicago on the broadcast team, obviously former head coach of the Bears. And I asked him about Fangio, and he goes, and I'm paraphrasing here a bit, but he said that Eagle defense will not fail because of the schematics that he's going to put in. He's a very fundamentally smart guy. He knows how to balance all three levels. It's a control. It's kind of like a control defense. Be cage. You want to throw underneath and you want to control and contain kind of defense. It's going to be more about the players. I mean, John, there's a lot of holes on that side of the football to have to address. There's restructuring deals. The cornerback deals are like lead weights around that franchise, especially that side of the ball. How do you see that being addressed here in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, they got to get better personnel wise. They got to make a lot of good decisions. They need their younger players to step up. If you think about the last 2 years, and it's the foundation of this defense has got to be built on Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, Kaylee Ringo, and I'm not mentioning just the Georgia players. They've taken so many Georgia players. They have to take a step forward. We've seen some of the social media stuff with Jalen Carter. He's got to mature quickly because he's got to be the foundation of this defense. And they got to get better. I agree with Dave on Big. They're going to be better. Look, they've been playing the scheme for 3 years. There's not going to be a drastic change in scheme, but this is the guy who created it, and he's going to teach it as well as it can be taught. My only issue, and I've said this pretty consistently, I think there were so many copycats over the past few years. The league has caught up to it a bit, and we'll see how much Big can evolve. I know he was complaining about that himself when he went down to Miami. He wasn't happy with how many people are playing it, because then it becomes easier. Quarterbacks see it. They become more comfortable dealing with it. And we've seen it in the past, whether it's Tony Dungy and his cover 2 and Pete Carroll and the cover 3 and Legion of Boom. And there's always a tipping point where everybody copies it. Mike Zimmer, who's back with Dallas, he had the A-gap stuff. There's always a tipping point. People figure it out, and then you got to evolve. Is Vic going to evolve at this stage? We'll have to see. But I do think if you look at all the teams that played his scheme, including the Dolphins, they were all bottom half of the league. So you can make a strong argument that people have caught up to it.
How about this here? The news just breaking before you came on. Steve Wilkes has been let go as the DC of the 49ers. And it just shows you here too, John, even a guy with a 667 win percentage, there was a come to Jesus conversation even with Nick Sirianni in the organization. Do you think it got to a conversation where there was a debate on whether or not he's back? Do you think it was a strong debate? Because it looks to me now, when you fire a guy like Wilkes, who helped you get to a Super Bowl, the pressure in the NFL is today. Here's a guy here. It's not like he won 4 games, John. He held Patrick Mahomes to 19 points for 4 quarters. I mean, it wasn't like they stunk in that ball game. I thought they were going against Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, and it was a slugfest. And he gets released of his contract. I mean, this is something we're going to see more of it, and no matter what your win percentage is.
Yeah, I mean, the impatience in this league is crazy. Especially,
do you think it's been expedited now because of the money?
Oh yeah, no question. It's gotten worse. I mean, we're to a point. There's not an offensive coordinator that's been in place in this league past 2022. That's how quick those things move. And you're looking at the 49ers. The 49ers, you know, under the old rules, they would have won the Super Bowl. They would have won the toss, sudden death, went down, kicked a field goal, won the Super Bowl, would have been Super Bowl champions. I only bring that up to say, yeah, that's how close they were.
Yeah.
And you're firing the defensive coordinator. They're like everybody else. They need to assign blame. And they're not firing Kyle Shanahan for blowing the coin toss. So you got to blame somebody. They're blaming Steve Wilkes. I don't get he wants to play. Basically, Kyle Shanahan wants to play the Vic Fangio style defense. So that could be a landing spot for Brandon Staley or somebody of that nature. So he never felt comfortable with Steve to begin with, but you have to, when you lose in this league now, as Jeffrey Lurie proved here in Philadelphia, you have to assign blame. Yeah, and my whole point to that is, yeah, you don't have to. You think you have to. If you look at this league as a whole, the teams with continuity are the successful teams. And when you have a place like Philadelphia, and I've made this argument, yeah, the fans can say, we're not going to watch, we're not coming back. If Brian Johnson comes back, they're coming back. You have the luxury of understanding that. You should have the luxury of understanding that if you're the owner. But, it's a public facing industry. There's a ton of pressure to say, oh, we didn't reach expectations. And you see it with the Super Bowl loser firing the defensive coordinator. It's absurd on its face. But they did it because they had to assign blame. And it's not a good way of doing business.
Absolutely not. And I think it's just the way the league is too sometimes. But now the money, as we said, John, it expedites it now because, again, you have Brock Purdy. Again, there's pressure on that. And I say this to people. When you got a guy making less than $900,000, you got a runway of being able to keep all those guys together because you're not paying that big number to that guy. And for you to keep that roster intact, that goes back to Howie, what he does great. And I commend him. Those cap hits is not the salaries of Hurts is not going to be the issue for the first 2 years of his deal, maybe even into the third year. More Daniel Jones. You talk about devastating to the cap. They're kind of in a window right now where they have to win. So these coordinators are under some big time pressure. And I want to ask you about the coordinator in Philly and Kellen Moore. So Kellen Moore in Dallas dealt with Dak. Dak and Jalen don't really have the same skill set. Justin Herbert and Dak and Jalen don't have the same skill set. Now, are they bringing Kellen Moore in to have a better version of 2023? Or are they bringing Kellen Moore in to try to get Jalen Hurts to get back to playing the MVP ball that he played with when he was the 22 version? Because the 22 version's scary, John. The 23 version, there's a lot of holes in that game.
Well, I think, they had a lot of interest in Cliff Kingsbury. didn't work out for whatever reason. And I think they
You think
shifted.
that was close, John?
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm not going to say close. I think the they had the first interviews with the candidates, Zoom interviews, basically, and I think at that standpoint, going into the first interview, I think their thought process was, all right, if we like what we hear from Cliff Kingsbury, he's going to be the offensive coordinator. And they got through that first interview, and we talk about autonomy and how this is going to work. And there were certain guys, obviously led by Jeff Stoutland, but as they announced the coaching staff, there's going to be a couple other guys from the offensive staff staying. And evidently Cliff wanted a little bit more autonomy that they were comfortable with as far as bringing in his own guys. And then they went a different direction. So I wouldn't say it was probably 1A and 1B. And I think Cliff was a little bit too pushy in as far as trying to get things exactly as he wanted it. And then they shifted to Kellen Moore. It's interesting from Jalen Hurts' perspective. I think if you want to accentuate what Jalen Hurts does well right now, I think Cliff is a better fit. I think if you want him to evolve and do some of the things that all the fans complain about, being under center, motion, being able to understand hot routes and things of that nature, I think the evolution of the position, Kellen's a better fit. So it depends where you want to go with it. I would prefer to go with it in getting better, evolving. And I think from that standpoint, I think it works out. They got probably the better candidate.
Couple last questions for you, John. The draft. What do you think is the top priority on that football team?
I think defensively, I think it'll start with cornerback. But, the problem is when you talk about the draft, the Eagles generally are pretty good. It's not only about evaluation, it's about valuation. So if you argue they're going to stay at the 22nd pick and how he can move up, he can move down, he can do a whole bunch of stuff. There are so many tackles that are going to be in that range. If you look at Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 list, he's got about 9 tackles in the top 20. So what that tells me,
offensive
tackles. It's unbelievable. It starts with Alt from Notre Dame. I think he has at 9, and I think there's 7 or 8 more down at 20, down to the top 20. What that tells me is offensive tackles are going to get pushed down the board because not everybody is going to want to draft an offensive tackle. Whereas you look at corner, there's only 3 or 4 guys in the equation, and that means they're going to get pushed up the board. So Howie's very honest. If it comes down to, players who have the same grade or in the same realm, he's always going to pick offensive or defensive line first. So if you're a betting man, I bet on offensive tackle in the first round.
John, I would say this. Doesn't it make more sense because there's more holes over on that side of the football defensively? You trade out of the first. You get multiple 2s and 3s so that you can have the ability, because right now you're at $20 million in cap space, depending on what happens with Reddick and maybe some conversations with your corners and maybe some restructuring somewhere else along the line where you could free up some money. As you know, $18 million is allocated towards the draft. So at the end of the day, you really don't have a lot of latitude in free agency to make that money. Now, he's really good at that, at creating space, so I'm assuming he will. But doesn't it make more sense? I mean, you think there'll be more of a priority in the draft or free agency this offseason?
Well, right now they have 2 picks in the second round. They have a 3rd round pick, so they're pretty well stocked up at the top. They're going to have a bunch of compensatory picks on day 3, and we'll see. I mean, they could trade Haason Reddick and get another 2nd round pick. So all of a sudden, You do need to add bodies, but they need to add meaningful bodies. And I talked about those young players. Look, they've been going defense, defense, defense heavily,
Yep.
and they have to start. A big part of their plan is going to say, look at Big Fangio and say, we have Jordan Davis, we have Jalen Carter up front. That's our foundation. Whether you like Kaylee Ringo or not, Eli Ricks showed some promise. They have some young corners. Nakobe Dean's got to stay healthy. They picked up Isaiah Rogers, who's likely going to be back in the mix after his gambling suspension. So they have some bodies, and they can add. And they have, as I said, 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. So I don't think it's a necessity to trade out because you're taking a big knockdown if you go out. And I was talking about Kwesi Odofa-Mensah this morning. He did it a couple years ago when he drafted Lewis Seen. Kyle Hamilton was there. He won a safety. It's like you don't drop down from 11 to 32 and think you're going to get the same level of talent. Well, this will be 22 to say the second round. You're taking a huge drop off on talent from that perspective. As I said, if you stay at 22, you get a tackle that may be a top 20 pick, as opposed, and Lane Johnson's 34 years old. You have to start thinking about the future as well. It's not just about 2024, and that's what Howie Roseman's good at. So he's always thinking 2 years, 3 years in advance. So even if they have to wait for somebody, they've proven they'll wait for somebody. If they can get a corner, they'll certainly look at that heavily. No doubt about that. But the valuation's got to be there as well. I would think they're more likely to target and trade up to get one specific player than to trade down just to accumulate more picks.
I have 2 trades potentially, and tell me if I'm crazy in this one. Let's do the first one here. And hear me out on it, because in November, from what I've been told, and I know you know this, Howie Roseman contacted Denver along with San Francisco, potentially moving and getting Patrick Surtain. There were 2 teams that were in the mix. It was the Niners and the Eagles, and Denver didn't like the packages from both teams. So now here we go into the offseason here. With the 22nd pick, and you go to Denver, from what we're understanding, June 1, Russell Wilson's going to be cut. They're going to try to accumulate, because they lost all them draft picks, John, for the acquiring of Wilson. And remember, New Orleans gets their number 1 because they had to make that move for Sean Payton. They had to give compensation up. He's still in a rookie year, and he's got the 5th-year option. Why wouldn't you package something up in the offseason here to get a surefire guy, have Slay and Surtain at both corners? You automatically fix, and you put a 24-year-old guy in the room who's got an option, and he's still on a rookie deal, and it gives you a little latitude, and it gives you a little payroll flexibility for you to be able to go linebacker and maybe some edge depth if you were able to do that and not spend as much money as you have to.
Yeah, I don't know why people keep thinking Patrick Surtain is going to get traded. I think there was a little bit of an arms race there. San Francisco called, there was some speculation that there was going to be a fire sale in Denver, but he was never made available. Now, the Eagles had tremendous interest in Surtain coming out. They wanted to draft him, and actually they had J.C. Horn ahead of Patrick Surtain. So
Cowboys too.
Yeah, Horn would have been their first choice. Surtain was their second. Once they both came off the board, that's when they moved up to get Devontae Smith. They had 4 players in mind. And once the corners, they had to go up and get Devontae, which has worked out for them. But last year, the 49ers didn't want the Eagles at the time. They thought they would face each other. And obviously the Eagles fell off the cliff. So you had that bit of an arms race. Each team didn't want the other. So they both called. But the only way Denver's trading Patrick Surtain is to go up in the draft to get a quarterback. That's the only way. And it's going to have nothing to do with the Eagles. Now, they also called on Jalen Johnson, who's a hell of a player in
Kid in
Chicago.
Chicago's fantastic, and he's a free agent.
But I think he's so good, Chicago kind of figured out that we want to keep him. And I wouldn't be surprised if they put the tag on him if it has to be. So, but yeah, they know they need an upgrade at cornerback, but it makes no sense for Denver to trade Patrick Surtain unless they're going way up in the draft and getting, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, somebody to take over their quarterback situation.
Michael Penix.
I think that's too high. I'm talking the three guys at the top of the draft are going to be Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. All three of them will probably go top 5. And if Denver wants to go up and get one of them, they're going to probably have to give up Patrick Surtain. But for anybody else who just wants a corner, he's young. They have a great corner. Yeah, they're not getting rid of him unless they can get a quarterback, and then it would make some sense.
The kid, even in Chicago, is 24. I mean,
yeah, he's a great player too.
Last question for you here, John. The payroll flexibility that I just mentioned. I mean, I look at Haason Reddick and I look at him on, you may think I'm crazy when I make this comment, but when I see him on that defense with that talent, I think he's a liability. He's not very good in coverage. And he's not very good against the run. He's really a one-trick guy. And when you have a guy on the other end who gives you double-digit sacks, you kind of balance it. And he's a force. Hey, John, on a good team, he's a force. On a team that's 27th in pass defense, he's not very good, and he's no impact, and he's $15 million. If you're Howie, how do you handle this? Do you want to restructure a deal? Because personally, I don't think he's a $20 million guy, and I'm not even sure with his limited skills outside of pass rushing, he's a 15. Now, there's a premium on getting home. I know that. So between 12 and 15, he's probably in the room. But how do you handle this?
Well, I think you handle it like the Eagles are handling it. They don't think he's a $20 million player, and they want him to go out. And they gave Tory Dandy, his agent, permission to seek a trade. And what they're trying to say, they did the same thing with Darius Slay last year. They're trying to say, we're not lowballing you. Go out and go out and gauge the market. And if you can find somebody who wants to give you $20+ million, we'll talk to them about a trade. I would think it would have to start with a 2nd round pick. And if that can be worked out, the win-win type of situation, they'd be willing to move them. Otherwise, you're looking at what happened with Slay. Maybe you tack on an extra year for cap relief. You give him more money up front. He's getting about $15 million this year up front. So maybe that turns into $25 million over 2 years, guaranteed, right up front. Something of that nature, even 30. So that's what they're doing. They're trying to replicate the Darius Slay situation. I think you're right. I mean, he's a pass rusher, but that's every pass rusher. And why was he so successful in 2022? Well, the Eagles were always playing from the lead.
Yep.
They were pinning their ears back. 3rd and long, he's getting home. When you're 27th in pass defense, as you mentioned, you're losing. All of a sudden, you can't pin your ears back. He's not the same effectiveness as the player. But if you look at Vic Fangio's history, even last year with, guys like Van Ginkel, when he came in for Phillips and got injured, he had great pass rushers. You could go back to Chicago with Khalil Mack. He knows how to take advantage of good pass rushers. But give me one pass rusher, Dan, that's effective when they can't pin their ears back. As effective.
And by the way, when he gets home, he's a game wrecker.
Oh, yeah. He wrecked the NFC Championship game. I mean, let's be honest. He completely wrecked injured Brock Purdy, legal hit, by the way, completely wrecked that game. If the Eagles are playing from the lead and it's 3rd and 10 in the fourth quarter, he's a guy you want on your team.
31 sacks in 2 years, John.
Yeah. Well, there's only 2 players double-digit sacks over the last 4 years, and he's one of them. So,
Okay,
you got to give him some credit.
I asked Angelo this, and on the way out the door here, I have to ask you. Boy, he's not a Andy Reid fan.
How can you not be an Andy Reid fan? What does that even mean?
That's what my wife and I said. She goes like this, did you agree? And I'm like, no. I go, it's the only thing I didn't agree with him on since he comes on almost every week. And I was like, I mean, is it because of the not bringing the title home?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to win.
How did you feel when you saw him win that third one?
I mean, it didn't change. He's one of the best coaches of all time. It didn't change that. You can look at the overtime situation with all the stuff going on with Kyle Shanahan about taking the football, not understanding the situation, his players not being aware of the rule changes with overtime going into the game. And then you talk to the Kansas City players, and this defines Andy better than anything. They were talking about that stuff in training camp because his attention to detail, even if you go back to 1999, when the Eagles hired him and nobody knew who he was, making the big leap from a position coach in Green Bay. What blew Jeffrey Lurie away was he had binders and plans and schedules. And I always joke about Andy. You could say, all right, what's your training camp? What's day 3 of training camp going to look like in 2026? He already knows. He's already got that mapped out, minute to minute, day to day, everything. So he was talking to his players about what they were going to do in this situation back in training camp because he leaves no stone left uncovered. So people get really bogged down about play calling, and obviously here. And I don't know if you saw Tom Brady on the Steve Young podcast, but Tom was great. I've been trying to explain this for 3 years. Tom explained it in 5 words. When play callers are basically, just predictive. They're playing the odds. So if it's 3rd and short, they think they're going to see man coverage. They throw a bunch of manning. If it's 3rd and 14, you're going to see quarters, cover 2, cover 6, whatever, and you throw in what you're best. As a quarterback, you have to understand what's going on. And if you're not in the right play, you got to be depth enough to manipulate it. So people get way too bogged down on play calling. The preparation to get the players prepared for those situations, that's where Andy Reid beats people. And you see his bye week record that everybody talks about. He's better prepared than everybody else.
John, do you think I am overstating this and maybe you can help me? I put something out the other day and I said, this is what I thought when I saw him raise the trophy. Okay, I get the 14 years. It was a long time. I don't know really too many coaches that were in one place 14 years that didn't win, maybe Bud Grant, that were in one place. But then I started thinking about 5. I just wonder if he ever thinks about lost opportunity and that because it just looks like Mahomes buys in everything he's saying, everything he's teaching, everything he's doing. And it just looks like a complete buy-in. And I mean, even when things are going south, how he handled the bump of Kelsey, how he handled, even in the Eagle game, when guys were dropping passes. Hey, I'm with my guys. I'm with them. That's Reid in his ear. That's Reid telling him, hey, you're the calming force here, not me. And it just, I just wonder how Donovan, he just didn't take advantage of one of the most brilliant play callers. Now, maybe he's different. Hey, 15's different. I get that. I'm not putting them in the same room, but I'm saying that one, I mean, how did,
well, it's hard to win. It's hard to win. And I think, the Tom Brady's of the world, and the Patrick Mahomes now have skewed things, and
Yep.
people think it's easy to win. I mean, you look at all the struggles Kansas City had this year,
A lot.
And trying to build skill position people and finally getting it hot at the right time down the stretch. They have a big eraser and Patrick Mahomes. So you go back to, and Donovan was a great player, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. You go back to last year's Super Bowl with the Eagles loss, and everybody's killing Jonathan Gannon and saying Andy Reid out schemed him. Well, I got news for you. Inside the NFL had Patrick Mahomes mic'd up, and Kansas City wasn't even in the right formation for the second touchdown. He on the field was able, just what I was talking about, like Tom Brady, guys lined up wrong. Guys didn't do what they were supposed to. He put them in the right positions. He changed the play from one side to the other on field. All of a sudden, they have a walk-in touchdown. That's the quarterback on the field. That has nothing to do with Andy Reid's play calling. They screwed up the play, and the quarterback saved his you-know-what. So, look, yeah, it's easier with Patrick Mahomes. The thing that defines Andy Reid, and you mentioned Bud Grant, because I covered Minnesota as well, and I have a lot of respect for Bud and got to meet Bud. And he lost 4 Super Bowls. And I say this about Buffalo and Marv Levy as well. And he made 4 straight, but didn't win one. In many ways, the consistency is more impressive to me than winning one. And
You're a football man, John. You're a football man because most people don't look at how hard it is to win 4 straight AFC titles. And I tell Kelly that all the time. 4-time AFC champions in a row, John. You'll never see that again in pro football history.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And yeah, it's never going to get what it should as far as people respecting what they did. But, the revisionist history, John Elway, I always say this, was a great quarterback when he was losing Super Bowls. When he won Super Bowls, he was at the end of his career. It was Terrell Davis's team. He got carried to nobody remembers. Peyton Manning, they say for years and years and years, he's only got one. And then he won another one. He was terrible.
He was
terrible.
He was carried across the finish line.
Yeah. But people say 1-2. Aaron Rodgers, for years, Aaron Rodgers was the best quarterback in football. And people say he's only got one, like it's easy to do. So I think Tom and Patrick have skewed it for people. To the mere mortals of the world, one is a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. John, thank you for the time. Hey, by the way, when does it start up again? Free agency's got to be around the corner, 2 weeks, right?
March 13th or 14th is the start of the new league year.
From the startup of that?
Combine starts in a couple weeks, and then free agency. Yeah, the NFL sets up the calendar, so there's always something going on.
John, they're the greatest sports I mean, a note to baseball in the NBA. Have you ever put a sports calendar together? Because the NFL has mastered it.
Yeah,
I mean, they got everything on the horizon. I mean, the draft will have what, John? Probably 70 million people watch that thing with a guy going like this, from a guy from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, in the 7th round. People are going to be cheering for it and watching it. It's insane what the league is with over 200 million people watching the Super Bowl. It's incredible.
Yep. Yeah, they do. I've been talking about that for years. It's seamless. They go right from the Super Bowl. Now we're talking, they have the Senior Bowl before the Super Bowl. Now we're talking about the combine, the new league year. Then you start talking about the draft. Then you have rookie camps, mini camps. Then you're into training camp. It's unbelievable the way they've set it up.
My good friend Greg Coleman, who was up in Minnesota when probably you were covering him. He's one of my good friends that was up there during that time. That's a great team. And I always say this too, John. I know I got to let you out of here. I've been saying it enough. But here, do you know why they don't go to Super Bowls anymore? they put a lid on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
When they were at
the old
Metropolitan Stadium,
Met Stadium. Yeah.
when they were at Metropolitan Stadium, John, that was the greatest home field advantage in pro football history, going up there in sub 33 degrees minus weather, and you had to go play them Viking guys up there. Ed White was
Yeah,
your friend of mine.
but you're mentioning some of the guys. Don't that was a big home field advantage, but you also had Fran Tarkenton, Ron Yuri, Ed White, as you mentioned, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall,
Paul Krause,
Roy Winston, Paul Krause, on and on and on and on. They had so many great players.
Marshall and Page.
And I always say, Green Bay, everybody says what a home field advantage Lambeau has been, and it has, but people forget in between Bart Starr and Brett Favre, they had no home field advantage. They didn't even care. They played in Milwaukee County Stadium half the year. They had half the games in Milwaukee. They didn't even care because they couldn't win.
Hey, John, look at this. I got a program that I was in, and here's what you're talking about. And John is right. I played a game at Milwaukee County Stadium.
Yeah.
And because they used to play one game down there, right, John, a year.
Couple games.
Southern part
more,
of the state.
More than one. Yeah.
Oh, they played more than one?
Yeah.
Hey, John, it's the only time I ever played a football game where the sidelines were on the same sidelines.
Yeah, well, that's Met Stadium as well. Met Stadium had them on the same sidelines. So both teams were on the same
sideline. Shea did too, huh?
Yeah. Vikings, Met Stadium. Yeah.
Oh, Met Stadium. Okay. Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that. John, let me get you the hell out of here, man, before I keep you longer, because we could talk forever. Thank you so much, folks. Don't forget, Birds 365, him and Jody do an absolutely bang-up show each and every single Monday through Friday here on JAKIB. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
John McMullen, please do me a favor. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.